Right. Good morning, Bore da, everybody. Welcome to today's Powys County Council Cabinet meeting. First of all, an apology. We were due to start at 10:15. Unfortunately, we're having some quite significant technical problems here, so we've had to change our system. So that explains the late start, and also it might explain that the meeting may appear a bit clunky if you're observing it from afar, for which I apologise. We're going to do our best to keep it live so everybody can watch. But I make a start by explaining for those who can't see or who's here. I'm Councillor James Gibson-Watt. I'm the leader of Powys County Council. Also present in County Hall today, I have Councillor Pete Roberts, Councillor Susan McNicholas, Councillor David Thomas, Councillor Sean Cox, Councillor Matthew Dorrance, Councillor David Selby, and we have joining us online Councillor Jackie Charlton and Councillor Richard Church and Councillor Sandra Davis. We also have senior officers present, the Chief Executive of the Council, Caroline Turner, Chief Finance Officer Jane Thomas, Corporate Director Emma Palmer, Diane Reynolds, Clive Pinyar, Monitoring Officer Steve Boyd, taking the minutes, Nina Davis, Head of Social Care, Director of Social Care and Housing, Lynette Lovell, Director of Education, and Nigel Bryn, who is, I think, joining us remotely. He's online as well, who's our Strategic Director of Environment and Economy. I hope I haven't forgotten anybody. If I have, I will introduce them as and when required during the meeting. Can we start, please, with apologies, Steve? Are there any others? Jake did indicate he wouldn't be present today, to me yesterday. Good. Then we can move to the minutes of the 28th of June and also as the 5th of July. So that's pages 5 to 16. I need somebody to propose and second those minutes as a correct record of what took place. Proposed by Councillor Matthew Dorrance, seconded by Councillor David Selby. So does that apply for both sets of minutes, gentlemen? Thank you very much. That's duly noted. Thank you. And we move back to the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest for any of the items on today's agenda from members, please? There are none. That's noted. If anything arises which members feel that is an interest, then at the time, then please declare at the time and we'll react accordingly. Thank you very much. We'll move to item 4. This is the Q1 performance report, which is accessed via the SWAY report helpfully provided. It's a lengthy report. It highlights the things we're doing well and the things we're doing not so well. I don't intend that we go through this in great detail because there's no particular need. It's available online to the public. It provides a summary of the key performance indicators across the council's services. Are there any issues at this stage, at the start of the meeting, which members individually, particularly portfolio holders, wish to raise to draw attention of the Cabinet and the general public at this stage? We have none. No issues to be raised. I think what this Q1 performance report does emphasise and demonstrates for us, it's an extremely useful document, interactive document, which most we and members of the public can access to sort of delve into getting underneath the bare figures. It is actually telling us probably what we anecdotally knew as members and where we really need to concentrate our efforts in improving performance. The obvious areas and it indicates the areas of pressure on the council in terms of service delivery, and it's no surprise that social care particularly children's services, is an area where we're not achieving our objectives as well as we would like to. The chart, I'm just seeing which page it's on. In section 1 is the interactive chart, and one can click on those on it and move to various areas of the report, which with a narrative which explains the different aspects and explanations for why performance is as it is. Is there really are no other? Emma, did you want to make any comment about as the preparer of the report, for which our thanks? Is there anything you would like to particularly highlight?
I think you've covered the basis well, Leader. I think the main point for the public to be aware is that each service have had a quarterly performance review meeting with their respective portfolio holder or holders. Those meetings are minuted and discussions are undertaken in respect of exception reporting, so significant focus on those areas where we need to improve performance and what action we need to undertake. And the information is also considered in light of other reports that are on the agenda today, that being the finance position for Q1, the strategic risk register for Q1 also. And as we move forward within the report, you can see then specific details around where performance is not on track brought out in the narrative, and then the associated action that we would ask services to undertake to bring performance back in line with our aspirations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Just waiting for the, sorry, slightly more technical problems here from the chair. Lost my agenda. It's all right, it's coming back very slowly. Right, excellent. Clive, did you want to make a comment? Sorry, I did see your hand.
Thank you, Leader. There are some recommendations in the SWAY itself, which we need to go to, Leader. I can't find a page number on the SWAY, but I can read them out if section 9. Oh yes, thank you.
Thank you. It would be helpful, given my technical problems at the moment, if you could just read those out, Clive. Thank you, since you have them in front of you.
Thank you. The recommendations are, 1, the Cabinet notes the contents of the report, which presents an overview of performance for Q1, April the 1st to the 30th of June 2022, against the objectives and measures published in Vision 2025, our corporate improvement plan. The Cabinet approves the following amendments in relation to supported employment. Remove the current measure, which is the number of adults with a disability being supported to undertake employment, and replace with new measures, which are that the total number of adults with a disability currently in paid employment and supported by commission providers in Powys. Number 2, that the total number of adults with disability currently in a voluntary workplace supported by commission providers in Powys. And the rationale for that change is that the previous measure has never been accurately reported upon, as there are a range of significant factors, partners and interdependencies to an adult gaining employment. The proposed measures reflect the work of the commissioning team on behalf of Powys County Council in support of people to gain employment. Leader, members, there are as a further recommendation that the Cabinet approves the following amendments in relation to North Powys. The first is to remove the current measures, which are as follows: improved accessibility to services and community infrastructure that meet the needs of the population. Secondly, improved integration of services, partnership working and confidence in leadership, increased focus on prevention and health promotion, increased emotional and behavioural support for families, children and young people to build resilience and support transition into adulthood, to strengthen people's abilities to manage their own health and well-being and make healthier choices, increased independence and in participation with the communities, and improve the opportunity for people to access education, training and learning opportunities. Leader and members, those members are recommendation is to be replaced with the following: the percentage of people who attended a Powys Together project or event who reported positive change as a result of attending. And secondly, to replace it with the number of individuals empowered to access virtual and physical health tools and able to support the skills developed in the programme within 6 months of attending the last impact programme. Members, the rationale for that change is that the previous measures used have not been quantifiable measures, meaning that they have never been accurately reported and are in the medium-term outcomes for the programme and not performance measures. These new measures reflect an element of some of the accelerated projects undertaken within the programme and evidence how those changes, how these change projects are improving people's outcomes. And the reason for the recommendation is to celebrate key achievements as well as to recognise areas of underperformance and ensure that they are brought back on track and the Council's intended outcomes are achieved. Secondly, the recommendation reason is to ensure that the Council's performance management and quality assurance framework is implemented effectively, providing appropriate and timely reporting and monitoring against the corporate improvement plan. Also to reflect the Council's focus and priorities as set in the corporate improvement plan for April 22 to March 23, pending the publication of the new corporate plan to support the new vision of to build stronger, fairer and greener Powys. And the fourth reason for the recommendations is to ensure that the supported employment in North Powys measures are appropriate.
Thank you, Clive. My apologies for asking you to read out those lengthy recommendations, which I finally got back to. I just wanted to... Oh, thank you. I have Jackie wishing to come in, but before I do, just wanted to reinforce what it says in these about these changes for those who are perhaps a bit curious as to why we're making them. It's terribly important that we have measurable outcomes rather than vague ones or aspirational ones which are impossible to actually quantify. And I think personally I'm happy with these changes, but they will be kept under review at all times, and we will make further changes to more accurately reflect the performance that we're achieving as time develops. I've got Jackie online and then Sean, please, afterwards. Thank you very much. Councillor Jackie Charlton, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I would like to welcome these recommendations. I too didn't have them, so I'm very pleased they were read out. But I would like to say that some of these things have been discussed previously, and we knew that they weren't measurable. So I'm very pleased that this has been taken into consideration now, because it will make it a lot easier to see what we're doing for people, especially in employment, who have disabilities, because those issues weren't recorded anywhere, and we had no idea how many people, even within the authority, that we were employing with disabilities, and what we were able to do, what measures were in place to support them, to enable them to continue to do their jobs. So I very much welcome this, and thank you again for reading them out. Thank you.
Councillor Sian Cox, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to double check. So I agree also that the previous measures are outcomes, not measures really. And I agree with the new measures and that we do need to develop quantifiable measures. But I just want to check that those outcomes, nevertheless, that were the previous measures are still good aspirations and ones that we want to retain. So if they're being replaced in their entirety from this, do they survive somewhere for us to still keep an eye on and aim for? And are we able to explore whether there are measures that can be developed to quantify how well we're moving towards those goals?
Emma, can I, or Clive?
Leader, I think. Oh, sorry, Emma, after you.
This is the North Powys Wellbeing Programme. It's a partnership programme with the Health Board. Nigel Bryn has recently taken on the senior responsible owner role for this, and will work within the partnership and the programme to discuss the future outcomes in linking with Welsh Government. So it's not within the council's gift to determine that completely in isolation. We would need to bring those up with the partnership arrangements.
Sean, does that answer your question? Yes. Good. Are there any other questions that we... Do I have any other speakers, please? No? So we move to the recommendations, please. Could I have a proposer?
Happy to propose, Chair.
Councillor Jackie Charlton. Seconded, Matthew. Councillor Matthew Dorrance, thank you very much. Could I have a vote, please? All those in favour, please show. Fine, we have a clear majority. Thank you very much. Good, that's items dealt with. Thank you very much indeed. The agenda. So we move on, please, to the item 5 on the agenda, the strategic risk register for Q1, which is in the name of Councillor David Thomas. David, did you want to introduce this one?
Yes, thank you, Leader. This report's for decision. The purpose of this report is to set out the Council's latest position on managing its key risks contained in the Strategic Risk Register. Our Strategic Risk Register is key to safeguarding the organisation and building resilience into our services. At a time when the Council has faced and is still facing unprecedented challenges, the effective management of risk is needed more than ever. A risk-managed approach to decision-making will help us to achieve the well-being objectives in Stronger, Fairer, Greener, our corporate plan. To ensure a risk-managed approach to decision-making and good governance of the Council, Cabinet are asked to review the progress taken to mitigate the Council's strategic risks. The senior leadership team are currently reviewing the Strategic Risk Register and have reassessed the key risks as health and safety, social services, that's the insufficient capacity to respond to the longer-term demand in children's and adult services in a timely manner, Council budget, increased costs, recruitment and retention including demography, climate and nature emergency, compliance with GDPR and DPA, cybersecurity, regulatory inspections. If we look at the review of progress to mitigate strategic risks, as at the end of Q1 2022-23, there are 15 risks on the Strategic Risk Register, and risk owners have been asked to provide a short summary of progress since last quarter. Appendix A and the heat map and Appendix B provides the detail and the scoring of each risk. When looking at the escalations of risks to the Strategic Risk Register, housing services have requested that a service risk is escalated to the Strategic Risk Register. HO 0034, unable to provide or enable the development of enough additional homes to fulfil housing market demand. The consequences and mitigation in place is provided in the report. With regard to de-escalation of risks off the Strategic Risk Register, Property Planning and Public Protection would like to de-escalate risk 007, Heart of Wales Property Services, being unable to undertake contracted work in a timely and cost-effective manner. Heart of Wales Property Services no longer deliver the service as it is now delivered in-house. Officers will continue to consider and manage the risks associated with delivering the service in-house. Highways Transport and Recycling would like to de-escalate risk. HTR 0016, shortage of lorry and bus drivers. The initial shortage of lorry and bus drivers has been managed successfully and is now at a level and the service can manage the risk and the supporting risk controls through their own risk service register. COVID-19 risk register services have now incorporated any COVID-19 risks into their own service registers to be managed, and the COVID-19 risk register has been closed. That's the end of my report, Leader. If there's perhaps the 151 officer would like to add anything, and then we can take some questions.
Thank you, David. 151 officer has nothing to add. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? None? Sorry, Jackie, thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, I would just like to have reassurance that 3.8, I'm quite happy, well, I'm not so happy, the Highways and Transport and Recycling have asked to de-escalate the shortage of lorry and bus drivers, and I know this has been a big issue. I think they're on top of it, but last week showed us that there were still some shortages. I'd just like to get reassurance, as this was in the public domain last week and it was in the newspapers as well, is to make sure that we are sure that we're happy to de-escalate that now.
Nigel?
Thank you,
Britt,
Chair.
please.
Happy to come in. I think the issue is the scale, because we're talking about the corporate risk register here. We have recruitment and retention issues in numerous services, as I'm sure everyone appreciates. But at a particular point in time, there was an exodus of drivers from many local authorities to the private sector, and we were struggling with that. That has abated. There is still a recruitment and retention issue across the team, and it will remain as one of Matt Perry's head of services risks on his risk register. Hopefully that clarifies, Chair, and Councillor Jackie.
That's fine. Thank you. I'm very happy with that, and thank you for the reassurance. Thank you.
Good. Are there any other comments or questions, please? Just from the chair, I'd just like to make it clear on 3.9, the COVID-19 risk register. Everybody's aware COVID-19 has not gone away, and it will remain under constant review as to whether it should be placed back on the corporate risk register or whether we should still deal with it at service level risk. But it is clearly a moving picture, and one that can change very quickly. But just to reiterate that point. Good. We need to. Are there any recommendations?
Yes, Leader. I'll put the recommendation.
Yes, please.
It's recommended that Cabinet notes the current strategic risk register and is satisfied with progress against mitigating actions for Q1. Approves escalation of HO 0034 to the strategic risk register and de-escalation of PP 007 and HTR 0016, detailed under points 37 and 38 from the strategic risk register. The recommendation above will ensure appropriate understanding and management of strategic risks which could prevent us from achieving our objectives, and a risk managed approach to decision making and good governance of the Council. Thank you, Leader.
Can I have a proposer, please, for that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Susan Nicholas. And the seconder, please. Somebody second the recommendation, please. Oh, Councillor Sian Cox seconding. Could I have a show of hands, please, those in favour of the recommendation? Thank you very much. That's clearly moved unanimously. Good. We move on to the next item on the agenda, which is in the name of Councillor Pete Roberts, portfolio holder for Learning Paris, a bit of good news for a change. Thank you. The Welsh Education Strategic Plan, please.
Thank you, Leader. The Welsh Education Strategic Plan is a statutory document that all local authorities in Wales have to produce, outlining how they will be delivering Welsh medium-based education. The current plan that we're now looking at has been developed over a number of years largely by the previous administration, but with close cooperation with scrutiny and other partners outside of the administration. It's been approved by the previous cabinet to go to the Welsh Government for final review, and it is the outcome of their responses that we're considering now. I'd just like to pass you across to Lynette Lovell now, who will take us through the changes that have been made since the previous cabinet discussion. Thank you, Lynette.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. I'll take you to 2.12 of the report here, and as Councillor Pete has already said, following Cabinet approval, the post-consultation West was submitted to the Welsh Government before the end of January, as required by the Welsh Education Strategic Plan Regulations 2019. Feedback was received, as Councillor Pete has said, from the Welsh Government in May 2022, and that's attached in Appendix B. The feedback received from Welsh Government included a request that an updated version of the document was submitted to Welsh Government in June 2022. The WESP has been updated to reflect that feedback received, and the updated document has been submitted to Welsh Government as required. The timescales for submitting the updated version to Welsh Government did not allow for the WESP to be brought to Cabinet before submitting to Welsh Government. In 2.17 of the report, there's a list there of the main changes that have been made to the document in response to the feedback received from the Welsh Government, and it's listed there for you in 2.17. So we have all in the next steps are that Welsh Government have approved the WESP. This paper came out before we'd heard last week that they have approved this. So today I'll just hand back now to Councillor Peat for any further questions and for the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Peat.
Thank you, Lynette. Are there any questions?
Any remote questions? Anybody on? Richard Church, Councillor Richard Church, please. Richard, you're on mute.
Yeah, not so much a question as a comment. I think obviously we welcome the report and welcome that we're now on the same page as the Welsh Government with this. But it is disappointing to see that we are, I think, the only local authority in Wales where the proportion of young people learning through the medium of Welsh is lower than the proportion of people speaking Welsh in the Powys population. So in that terms, if this was an end of school report, I think you will be signing it off saying must do better. And I think we have to do better. We have to be more ambitious for the speaking of Welsh in our county. And I know Councillor Peat, as the portfolio holder, is ambitious for us to do better, and I'm sure the whole Cabinet is. We need to be able to say that more young people are learning Welsh than the proportion of the people in the Welsh population, and we need to do that as quickly as possible.
Good, thank you. I'm sure sentiments that would be shared by all of us on Cabinet and indeed the whole Council, I suspect, as well. So thank you for those comments. Peter, do you want to make any further comment?
Yeah, I think the key thing here is that we are looking at new approaches in how we expand Welsh medium education. For too long, and not just in this county, the focus has been on growing the Welsh language within its heartlands, and we are going to look beyond that. I've already had discussions around possibilities in the Gwenavit catchment, and Cabinet as made the decision a few weeks ago to look to see whether we could start from virtually nothing and seed with community support the development of a Welsh medium school in a traditionally English speaking area. So we are going to be brave, we are going to try new and innovative approaches, and at the end of our 5 years, if we have not succeeded in making further progress, it's not for want of trying and not for want of trying to do things differently.
Thank you. Would the Director like to make any further comment in regard of what Councillor Richard Church had to say?
Yes, I can do. Thank you, Leader. Just to say that absolutely, I think the point is well made. Sorry, I'll try to get my camera on. Point is very well made. Absolutely, we do have a lot of work to do. We know that it was part of our Estyn recommendation to improve Welsh medium provision, ensure we have clear pathways for pupils right the way from early years right to post 16 in Welsh medium provision. So it is an area that for us is a key priority for us as a council to ensure that our learners in Powys have those opportunities to be bilingual citizens in Wales in the 21st century.
Thank you, that's very clear. Sandra, you wishing to come in?
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I welcome the report, and I realise that there is a lot of work to be done, and it's ambitious, which I recommend. You know, I welcome. I've noticed the comments from the Minister, and I welcome these as an opportunity to put our house in order, if you like, because there are various outcomes there. I think 7 in total, and it's very clear what we have to do. And I think that if we follow these outcomes and follow the path there, we've got a clear guidance and how we move forward. What I'm looking forward to do is working with others within the Cabinet and trying to put these outcomes into fruition. And I would like to put in there the time frames that we plan to work. I'm looking forward to the workshop in the formation of the workshop in order for us to get started. And I'm hoping that we will start that sooner rather than later. I'm looking forward to that piece of work, and thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Sandra Davis. That's very helpful. Pete, would you like to move the recommendation, please?
Yeah, before I do, I just want to respond as to where we go forward from here. After we approve this recommendation, we have already had the confirmation back from the Minister that the document has received Welsh Government approval. So we now move on to the next stage of process, which is actually putting the plan together that is the nuts and bolts of what we are doing. Before that comes the translation and official publication of the documents, which has to be completed in the very near future. And then we move on to creating the action plan. And as Councillor Sandra has indicated, we will be looking to work cross-party and cross-chamber in developing that. And again, we have statutory timeframes in which that has to come to place. So moving back to the document, we do have one recommendation when I can get down to the right place, which is to approve the updated Welsh in Education Strategic Plan for 2022 to 2032 as contained in Appendix A.
Thank you. Do I have a proposer, please? Councillor Susan McNicholas, and a seconder, please. Richard Church seconding, thank you. Good. Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. And we move on again in the name of Councillor Pete Roberts to item 7 on the agenda, the school outturn positions, outturn positions for the 31st of March 2022 and the budgetary plans for 22-23. This is pages 139 to 152 on our agenda pack. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Leader. The back you have in front of us outlines the position at the end of what was quite an unusual financial year. Most of our schools had quite significant late grants coming in. So in many cases, you were seeing schools with what we would normally term to be out terms that would look us to consider clawing back finances. In this occasion, the Welsh Government have requested we look generously at these positions because many of the outturns relate to additional support in respect of COVID, in respect of catch-up. So whilst we have the ability to claw back from the schools that are returning a profit, what we term a profit, we've taken the decision not to, but ask the schools to come back with briefings and plans as to how that will be used throughout this and ongoing financial years, particularly to support the recovery in learning position of many pupils who have struggled. There are, however, a few issues to look through when we come on to the school's budgets in the years 22 to 23 and beyond. It is the process for school budgets, for those who are not aware, is that governing bodies are required to submit their budget plans by the 1st of May each year. At that point, the primary sector will submit a 3-year plan, including this year plus 2, and the secondary sector will be expected to submit a 4-year plan. Appendix B shows the school's balances and surpluses as we move forward to March 2025, which is the end of that cycle. This is expected to see in-year deficits in schools with surpluses in others, but for future years the secondary sector is actually looking quite concerning. You will see an increasing deficit position, which will put us into quite significant problems at 2 schools in particular at the end of this cycle. For that reason, we have already arranged or are in the process of arranging meetings with those schools to explore in more detail what the position is there, those being Ysgol Callum Cymru and Gwynavid having particular concerns. Moving forward, we are also looking at developing a benchmarking tool that schools will be able to work with, and we will be able to work with, to look at the wider positions and identify where the pressures are coming from. So we have at this stage a listing of schools that are in this position. A number have unlicensed budgets, which finance officers and school governors will work with over the coming months to bring them into a position where those budgets are compliant. I'll now briefly pass across to the 151 officer, Jane Thomas, to see if she has any specific issues that she wishes to highlight that I haven't already touched on.
Okay.
Chair. Really, just to reiterate some of what Councillor Peters said, you know, it's very pleasing to see the outturn position is at the end of last year, but as he rightly said, that is an unusual position. And schools will really need to focus on how they effectively use those balances now. Being mindful, of course, of increasing inflation and energy costs is going to be a key element in terms of schools managing their budget plans. So absolutely critical that schools continue to work with finance and HR officers and the school service to make sure that they can deliver curriculums within the funding that is available to them. So that work will continue, and if necessary, you know, I think the council has shown that it is prepared to take action where schools are not managing them as effectively as we think they could. So just to reiterate that we will continue to monitor this position carefully.
Thank you, Jane. Do you want to add anything, Lynette?
Sorry, thank you, Councillor Beach. Yeah, just to agree with yourself and with the 151 officer that absolutely, you know, we do need to, we are in an unusual year. We have got pressures to come, as well as the 151 officer has just rightly said, in terms of price increases for utilities, etc., that schools will have to work through. We do have schools that are causing some concern, as you've already highlighted, and the report does highlight there any action that we've taken, any warning notices that are with school currently, but we have to say that in general, working through with our schools effectively to ensure that they are able to deliver a broad and balanced curriculum within the funding envelope that they have, and working with them, those schools that have those deficit situations, particularly in the secondary sector, as you've rightly spoken about there, Councillor Pete, is that we're working with the governing bodies in those schools to ensure they can make the necessary improvements in terms of standards, as well as ensuring the budget position is improved. Thank you.
Thanks. Do any members have any questions?
Anybody online has a hand up? No, don't think so. Good. Okay, so we move to the recommendations, please.
Chair, there are no recommendations.
No.
It's
Just to receive.
only. Just to receive and to note.
Right. Okay. Do we need? Can you advise? Do we need to vote?
An acceptance by silence would be appropriate.
Unless members have any objection to receive this report. If I hear no objections, I'll take it as read that we accept it. Thank you very much indeed. Right. I'm moving back to the agenda, please. We move on to the financial forecast for the year. This is item 8 on the agenda, financial forecast for the year ended 31st of March 23. the position as it is at the end of June of this year. So this is a forecast based upon the figures that we have to date to the end of the first quarter. So to be found on page 153 onwards to 180. In the name of Councillor David Thomas. David, would you like to introduce this report, please?
Thank you, Leader. This report is again for decision. The purpose of this report is to provide Cabinet with a forecast revenue budget outturn for the 2022-23 financial year based on a position as at 30th of June 2022. Table 1 in the report sets out the projected full year outturn position across the Council services, including HRA and delegated schools. The table shows that after the proposed use of 3.8 million of specific reserves, a further deficit of 1,000,014 is currently projected. Appendix A provides detail of the financial position for each service, with commentary provided by heads of service in Appendix B. The projections are broken down into categories covering cost pressures, cost underspends, cost reductions, and proposed use of reserves. The use of reserves includes the call on specific reserves approved to meet identified pressures emerging at year end, and pressures identified as risk through the budget setting process. These relate to ongoing additional COVID costs, pressures arising from the crisis in Ukraine, and the impact of inflation. These costs will be funded from the £2 million revenue risk budget. The projected deficit of 1.014 million would also require funding from the Council's revenue reserves if it materialises. With regard to cost reductions, cost reductions of 8.072 million were approved as part of the Council's budget for this year, and the delivery of these is required to achieve a balanced budget in year. Undelivered savings from 2021-22 have also been rolled forward, bringing the overall total to be achieved this year of 10,855,000. Table 2 shows that 20% or 2.886 million have been delivered, and a further 42%, which is 4.541 million, are assured of delivery by services. Of most concern at such an early point in the year is that heads of service are highlighting that 3.428 million are unachieved and are at risk of delivery in year. This position must be challenged, and heads of service must consider what remedial action they can take to mitigate these shortfalls in order to deliver within budget. With regard to reserves, the reserves position is set out in Table 3. Revenue reserves at the beginning of this year stood at 63.782 million, with a general reserve holding 9.333 million, representing 4.2% of total net revenue budget, excluding schools and the HRA. Table 3 shows the projected use of specific reserves at 5.805 million, including the reserves movements I referred to earlier. The overall deficit, currently projected at 1.014 million, will fall on the budget management reserve if it materialises. When we look at environments and grants, Section 5 of the report sets out the grants received this quarter in both education and children's services. These are reported for information and will be included in the revenue budget. Environments for Cabinet approval are set out in Section 5.2. The first requests the transfer of £380,350 from the children's service budget to adult social care for the out-of-hours service. This service is now going to be line managed by officers within adults for both services. Environment is requested to transfer budgets within the education service. The movement of £427,110 is required to realign budgets due to management changes within the service. A budget adjustment is proposed to realign expenditure and income budgets within income and awards due to a change in the way the bailiff's charges are invoiced and accounted for. The environment sees the removal of £120,000 budgets on both the expenditure and income account codes. The final environment asks Cabinet to approve the drawdown of £192,916 from the specific elections reserve to fund the cost of the elections undertaken in May. A specific reserve is maintained to manage election costs as they vary year on year. Looking at the financial risks, a number of financial risks are set out in the report. The Council was able to achieve an underspend in last year's outturn due to the additional funding received from Welsh Government. That level of additional funding is not anticipated this year. The projected deficit reported this quarter demonstrates the additional pressures arising from COVID, the Ukrainian crisis and inflation. The call on reserves is likely to increase through the year. Rising inflation and in particular fuel and energy costs are now impacting on the Council, with contractors approaching the Council to raise their concerns and start discussions. With CPI inflation over 9%, recent pay awards set at 5%, and bank rate rises increasing the cost of borrowing, we must carefully manage our budget, seeking every opportunity to limit the impact. The greatest financial risk remains in our ability to deliver a balanced budget over the medium and longer term. The original modelling showed a £14 million budget gap up to 2027, but this gap is now likely to be significantly higher as we reassess our assumptions and the key pressures affecting future budgets. The medium-term financial strategy and the assumptions on which the financial resource model is based is being reviewed and will be considered by Cabinet in Council in September. We continue to plan in an increasingly challenging and uncertain time. Thank you, Leader. If the 151 officer would like to add anything, we can take some questions then.
Thank you, Councillor David. I think you've clearly set out the risks that the Council is facing. The economic climate is impacting on our residents, but it is also impacting on the Council. And it's important that we closely monitor the budget position this year and make sure that we take any action needed to rebalance our budget as we move through the next few quarters of the year. So we'll be working very closely with Cabinet and services to make sure that we can deliver that position. We do have reserves available. We set reserves aside specifically for these issues and to be able to manage the risk that presents. But being mindful, I think that even over the medium term, with inflation projected to continue to be at the higher level now, probably into next year, we do need to really carefully consider that use of reserves as we move through this year to make sure that we can set ourselves up well for those years in the future as well. So I think David has clearly outlined all of those risks very clearly in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Do I have any questions from members, please? None? No? And David, do you want to make any further comment, or are you happy to move the recommendations?
No, I'll move the recommendation, Leader, if that's all right with you.
Yep, by all means. Away.
Right. Recommendation. That Cabinet note the current budget position and the projected full year forecast to the end of March 2023. Service heads are required to develop their commentary at Appendix B to ensure that they set out how they will bring their budgets back in line and identify any mitigating actions that need to be agreed. The grants set out in section 5.1 are noted. The environment set out in section 5.2 are approved. This is to comply with the environment rules for budget movements between £100,000 and £500,000 as set out in the financial regulations. Thank you, Leader.
Good. Do I have a proposer for that, please? Councillor Pete Roberts proposes. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Susan McNicholas seconding. All those please in favour of accepting the recommendations. Thank you very much. That is unanimous. Good. And we can move on now. Again, sorry, Councillor David Thomas, it's you again. To item 9 on the agenda, the capital forecast as at 30th of June 2022.
Thank you again, Leader. This is for decision and information. This report provides an update on the financial position of the Council's capital programme for 2022-23 as at 30th of June 2022. The current year's programme was approved by Council on the 3rd of March 2022. It included capital schemes totalling 133.88 million, of which 25.55 million related to the housing revenue account. The programme has been updated following the reprofiling of projects from the previous year and additional grants received from Welsh Government. Table 1 in the report shows the revised budget at 115.31 million across each of the council services. Actual spend amounts to 11.22 million, representing 10% of the total budget. The programme is funded through grants, capital receipts, borrowing and revenue as set out in Chart 1. Borrowing supports 51%, 58.6 million of the capital programme. The interest cost for this is charged to the revenue account. Inflation is having a significant impact on the cost of schemes due to rising material and construction costs. Officers are considering this impact and are mitigating increases as far as possible. Some schemes may be reduced or paused. Any additional funding required is likely to increase borrowing. This will also add pressure on the revenue budget. This will be closely monitored with due regard to the ongoing affordability of the programme. When we look at grants received, a number of grants have been received during this first quarter, and these are listed in section 3 of the report. They include several Welsh Government schemes providing funding to support active travel and other highways related projects. There's also support for flood alleviation work and local places for nature schemes. 688,000 has also been allocated to support the rollout of the 20 mph default speed limit on restricted roads. Regeneration receives Welsh Government funding to support small-scale tourism infrastructure improvements, and education is allocated funding to support the community use of the schools. Welsh Government have confirmed this year's allocation of the major repairs allowance grant at 3.72 million. This is used to fund capital works on the council's housing stock. With regard to environments, 3 environments are requested for approval in section 4. An additional 140,000 is required to fund vehicles for the staff transferring back from Hopes. The additional costs are for the fitting out of the vehicles to meet health and safety requirements and the general increase in the cost of materials. This environment has been approved by the Chief Executive and Head of Service in line with the delegation of powers over the election period, and the works have been carried out. Cabinet are therefore asked to ratify this environment. Environment of £0.5 million is requested to fund the renewal of the catering management and cashless system to ensure there is continuity of service to learners, families and schools. The new system will see enhancements to the back office support, reducing administration. The business case has been considered and supported by the Capital Oversight Board. Funding sources will be explored, but if not secured, the scheme will be supported through borrowing. This will increase the cost of borrowing in the revenue budget by £104,000 per year, payable for 5 years. During the procurement and construction periods of the Abermule Business Park, there have been significant material and resource price increases, especially steelwork and concrete, which are a significant element of the project, and these have impacted on the original scheme budget. Value engineering has been undertaken to minimise the effect of the cost increases. However, this has not fully mitigated the impact. Additional budget of £140,000 is requested for approval. This increase will be funded from the unallocated amount already included in the capital programme, so there is no impact on the revenue budget. The report also sets out the reprofiling of budgets already approved and the capital receipt position. I don't know if the 151 officer would like to add anything to that, Chair, and we'll take some questions after that if there are any.
Young members, questions before we move to the recommendations? Any other officers wish to make a contribution? If they'll make any comment, that'd be fine as well. No? Oh yeah, Nigel Bryn, please. You're on mute, Nigel. There you go.
You think I've got used to remote?
Yeah. We all do it. We all do it.
Apologies, my enthusiasm came. Sorry, a very quick point just in relation to Abermule. Just re-emphasising what Councillor Thomas went through there, but also noting that we have taken on board a significant additional grant to cover some additional costs on site. So once we have some increased cost, we also brought in some additional grant above the order of 400k. So it's the net position is actually very positive in Abermule, and very much looking forward to inviting Cabinet to visit the site sometime soon.
Good. Thank you very much for that addition. Good. So, David, we move to recommendations, please.
Right, Leader. First recommendation is that the contents of this report are noted, and secondly, that Cabinet approves the environments proposed in Section 4. This is to comply with the environment rules for budget movements between £100,000 and £500,000 set out in the financial regulations.
Good. So just to note the report, but also to make a specific decision on the environments. Could I have a proposer, please? Proposed by Councillor Matthew Dorrance, seconded, please, by... Can I have a seconder? Oh, yeah, Councillor David Selby. Could all those in favour of the recommendations please show? Thank you very much. That is agreed, and we move back to the agenda. Thank you for your presentation, David. It's very clear. And we move to item 10, which is in my name as Council Leader, Cabinet Member for Open and Transparent Paris. That's the changes to the Improvement Board infrastructure within the Council. For those that when are not aware, early in the previous Council, following a report into first of all adult social care and then children's services, the Welsh Government in partnership with the Council set up an Improvement and Assurance Board, and after that board had done its chaired by an external chair, including independent members as well as members of the Council, and after that board was wound up by Welsh Government, after its work was done, the Council set up, or the previous cabinets, I should say, set up some transition and improvement boards in various areas of the service of the Council services to oversee the continued improvement journey. And it is felt that some of those now have run their course and are no longer required, I'm pleased to say, and some need to remain in place. And this is simply seeking Cabinets for information and approval of the changes that are made, as outlined in recommendations on number 8 on the report. It will, by its very nature, these changes will involving scrutiny committees more in overseeing the improvement work. So, and I think that's a really good development. Very happy with that, and I'm sure the scrutiny committees themselves will be keen to fulfil those extra functions. So that's, in my view, a strengthening of the scrutiny arrangements within the Council. So I thoroughly recommend these changes. However, I'm happy to take questions before we move to the recommendations. Would anybody? No comments. Would any either the Chief Executive or Emma Palmer, are you wishing to make any contribution? No, you're happy. Good. It's very straightforward. Thank you very much. So I will. Sian, is your hand up or no? Good. Thank you. Let's move to the recommendations then. In 8.1, it is recommended that the Improvement Boards for Education and Housing are stood down with immediate effect. That the appropriate scrutiny committees include within their forward work programme sufficient capacity to undertake the effective scrutiny of the service performance and risks, and more broadly corporate health at least quarterly. That the scrutiny committees submit their findings and recommendations to Cabinet at least quarterly. So that's the part where we're passing some of this responsibility onto scrutiny to enhance their work. The Highways Transport and Recycling Improvement Board continues for reasons that we still felt that there's a need for this board to continue its work as the service is facing some specific problems that need addressing, but then a further review is undertaken in 6 to 12 months or earlier if we need to do so. That an invite is extended to scrutiny chairs to observe the Transformation Delivery Board, which is the overarching, if you like, the overarching cabinet board, that an officer board that overlooks these processes. If that's all clear, would members, could I have a proposer please for those recommendations? Proposed by Councillor Pete Roberts, seconded by Richard Church. Thank you very much. Could all those in favour please show? Thank you very much indeed. That's carried unanimously. So we move on the agenda. Thank you, members. We have a request for additional funding for external domiciliary care. It's item 11 on the agenda, for external domiciliary care providers to pay for increased mileage rates for care workers to reflect, obviously, the increase in fuel costs, etc. This is in the name of Sian Cox. And Sian, if you'd like to just introduce the report, please.
Thank you, James. This is a report for decision. It presents the latest in our series of measures responding to the cost of living crisis as it affects our domiciliary care workers and the sustained and unsustainable impact this is having on our capacity to meet care needs and wellbeing objectives in Powys, particularly on our ability to attract, recruit and retain suitably qualified domiciliary care workers, and on our ability to fulfil our obligation to provide community-based care so that people ready to leave hospital can. Several, maybe all of us, have domiciliary care workers in our wards. Some of us have been the recipients of domiciliary care workers' pleas for help as they struggle to make ends meet and warn us that they're approaching the point where they will be forced to leave their jobs because the ends won't meet anymore. We know that care workers already are leaving their jobs to work in retail or hospitality or other low-skilled jobs where the absence of travel and its costs as a feature of the work makes the difference between the work paying enough to meet basic living costs or not. It's an urgent situation requiring immediate action. And I'll hand over to Michael Gray, who's on the call. He's the Head of Adult Services, and he'll speak to the detail of the new measure proposed in the report and answer your questions.
Thank you, Councillor Sian Cox. Thank you. Welcome, Michael. Just say who you are for those who don't know, who are listening in, and then please make your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So my name's Michael Gray, Head of Adult Services at Powys County Council, and thank you for the introduction, Councillor Sian. So in summary, the ask of Cabinet is to approve additional funding that will be used to increase the contractual rates paid to domiciliary care providers, commissioned domiciliary care providers. And this is so our external domiciliary care providers can increase the mileage rates paid to their staff from 35 pence per mile to 45 pence per mile. To facilitate this for the remainder of the 2022-23 financial year will require a virement of £148,991 from the Budget Management Reserve, and the value of that virement will be based on actual expenditure incurred based on the hours delivered. The ongoing costs for future years will be identified by the service in the financial resource model as part of the budget setting for the 2023-24 financial year and future years, and a contract variation would be sent to providers so that they would pay an increased mileage rate, and that increase or decrease would be in line with local authority rates. We've also said that officers will review the appropriateness of maintaining that equity of travel expense rates between public sector and private sector care staff in July 2023 and throughout the 12-month period through routine contract monitoring, and that review will consider the wider impact on recruitment and retention within the domiciliary care sector. So to summarise, this is about recruitment and retention of over 80% of our local domiciliary care workforce, which in turn we believe will help to encourage the sustainability of our local social care sector. And ultimately, this is about doing what we can as an authority to facilitate people moving out of hospital, back home, and supporting people to remain living independently in their own homes and communities for as long as possible. Happy to take any questions, and thank you.
Thank you. Members, does anybody have any? Councillor Matthew Dorrance, please.
Sorry, I had to work out which microphone to unmute. I'm pleased to see this. It is important to provide equity between public sector and independent sector care workers. So it's important that we make that change. However, I have picked up more recently calls from some trade unions, ones within this council and external ones, like the RCN, that there is a call to increase the HMRC rate of mileage that's paid for people working in health and social care. And I wonder what assessment we've made of that. If there is to be an increase in the basic rate, which is the 45 pence rate, the HMRC rate, what that means for this decision that we're being asked to make now, and will we need to review that in light of any potential increase that may come for the HMRC rate, and what would that look like in terms of cost? It is important to make the change now. I completely accept the case for that. I just wonder how we future-proof the decision to ensure that we don't end up in a position where the system is unfair again in a very short period of time. Thank you.
Good question.
Thanks, Councillor Matthew. Other colleagues may want to come in. I know that finance colleagues and HR colleagues have had a number of discussions with their regional counterparts to understand the likelihood of HMRC changing that rate. To date, we've not had any indication that HMRC will be upping that 45 pence mileage rate. So the paper was based on the assumption that that would not be happening anytime soon. But I agree, Councillor Matthew, we would have to review this if the HMRC rate was going to change, because that may result in the local authority deciding to increase that rate accordingly to be in line with the HMRC rate. But the paper at this point in time hasn't gone into that level of detail because we've received no indication that HMRC are intending to change that anytime soon.
Thank you.
Councillor Pete Roberts, please.
Michael, thank you for the reassurance that this will be contractual on the providers. But there are always loopholes and there are always ways around things if people aren't keen on passing everything on. So what assurance can you give us that the council will be monitoring to ensure that these increases going to the providers actually find their way through into increased mileage rates for the actual people that they're meant to get there, and won't end up in covering costs elsewhere within that provider's business?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Pete. It's a really important question. First of all, it will be a contractual expectation, and so it'll be built into our contract monitoring procedures. What tends to happen is we will be undertaking spot checks to make sure that these expenses are being paid accordingly, transported accordingly to the workers. I would also say that it's in these providers' best interests to pass on this increase in the mileage rates, given the cost of living crisis, given the fact that we have domiciliary care workers that are increasingly considering leaving the sector, in some cases having left the sector already. It's actually good business sense that these providers pass on this increase to these workers to help them sustain their businesses as well. But to provide assurances on how we will check, it will be through our ongoing contract monitoring processes, Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions, please, before we move to the recommendations? Nina wishes to contribute. Nina Davis, Head of Director. Say who you are, please, for the just for the record, so people who are.
Thank you, Leader.
Watching.
Director of Social Services and Housing. Thank you. I just wanted to speak very briefly in support of this report. I think it's really important that we provide this immediate support for external dom carers at this point. So very supportive of this coming forward. And as Michael said, it's just funding we're asking for 1 year at this stage, and we'll be looking to address it through the financial resource model moving forward. I just wanted to add that assure Cabinet, if during the year any external grant funding does become available that we could use to support this, we will of course make sure we make best use of any external grant funding that may become available during the year to support this if at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution and assurance. Good. Shall we move to the recommendations? We've got them before us, Sian. I won't ask you to read them out again. We've covered them actually pretty well in the discussion, each of them, in one way or another. If you would like to move the recommendations, that would be very welcome.
Happy to propose the recommendations.
Oh, thank you, Jackie. Yeah. Anybody seconding? Councillor Susan McNicholas is seconding. Could I have an indication from members, those in favour of the recommendations shown? Thank you. That's clearly carried. And we move back to the agenda. And we move to item 12, the proposal to increase Hackney carriage licence fares. We've had a supplementary agenda item sent to us covering the public consultation process that's taken place. And this is now, I think, largely retrospective. Councillor Richard Church, would you like to introduce this one, please?
Thank you, James. There's very little to say to this because the consultation has happened. There have been no objections. So there's no report to come to the committee. As I understand it, the Hackney carriage licensees have already been informed that they can proceed with the new rate.
Good. So we just received this for information. No need for a vote? No, none whatsoever. Thank you very much. Thank you, Richard. Moving on, item 13. Again, we had a notice in a supplementary agenda item sent to us on the Shared Prosperity Fund. Councillor David Selby, would you like to just take us through this report, please?
Thank you, Leader. I am here to introduce a very welcome and exciting investment opportunity for us here in Powys. We will welcome investment money from wherever it comes, and in this case it comes from UK government, and they've given us the opportunity of finding investment of £27.4 million over 3 years, starting immediately. It's part of a regional scheme, so we work together with Ceredigion to do that. Diane Reynolds will take us through the detail of it, but if I could just emphasise one particular aspect of the way in which we're working with this fund and proposals, in line with our open and democratic nature as a cabinet. We have so far started with information going out to potential stakeholders in the whole exercise. We have formed a consultative committee of this council, and I've met with that committee twice, and we've gone through the detail of what's available under the fund and the way in which the process works. It went through scrutiny yesterday afternoon when we were questioned on the basis of it and the detail going forward, and a regional webinar was held of, if I can get the number right, 164 people joined in listening to what we had to say. So we're very keen that this is not a top-down exercise, it's a bottom-up exercise in working with people to provide vital investment into various schemes throughout the county. And I'll now pass over to Diane to go through the detail.
Just to add that the Scrutiny Committee's recommendations are included in the supplementary pack that came with it. Thank you. Diane.
Thank you.
Can you just say who you are for the record? Sorry.
Certainly. Diane Reynolds, Head of Economy and Digital Services, Council. Thank you very much for reviewing this report. I'm just going to pull out a few key points. So under 2.5, this is a split allocation for ourselves and Ceredigion, totaling 27 million, 22 million, 704,129 pounds for Powys over 3 years between 22 and 25. We also have fees that we can charge to the for the processing to get us to the investment plan of 40,000 under 2.8. And the timeline as set by UK government gives us a deadline of the 1st of August to submit our regional investment plan, which is in combination with Ceredigion County Council. The regional investment plan would set out our high-level ambitions. Will not give the detail of any specific projects, but where our interventions are going to be focused and the allocation against those interventions in terms of the outcomes they will deliver. The prioritised investments are set out in section 3.11. These mirror those chosen in Ceredigion, and this was from the basis of evidence that we were looked at against all of the wellbeing assessments, economic assessments, and information from our webinars and consultation events. So from all of that information, we're proposing to split the allocation for POWESS against communities in place as 40%, supporting local businesses for 40%, and people and skills at 20%, which then also has the multiply numeracy provision of 4.7 million. This mirrors Ceredigion, who are also allocating their interventions at the same level. There is a formal expectation of members of Parliament to be involved in the process and to sign off the investment plan with ourselves. We've set out the resource implications for implementing the investment plan and the governance as set out in 4.4. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I understand that Councillor Angela Davis is here to present the scrutiny observations.
Precisely so. I was just about to call her. Thank you very much. Councillor Angela Davis, can you hear us?
Yes, Leader, I'm here and I can hear you.
Grand. Would you like to make your presentation? And thank you very much for attending, and indeed thank you and your committee for the report, which is very useful. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. So good morning. It is still just about morning. I'm Councillor Angela Davis, the Chair of Economy, Residents and Scrutiny Committee, which met yesterday, the 25th of July, to consider this document, the Shared Prosperity Fund submission of a regional investment plan. The committee thanked the Cabinet member for a more prosperous POWESS and officers for attending our meeting yesterday. We made a number of observations which are set out in the report before you, and I'll just highlight a couple of those. The committee were in support of this proposal that this funding is going to bring into POWESS over the 3-year period, and it's very much to be welcomed. The committee were assured that the interventions identified by both POWESS and Ceredigion were identical, and there was much synergy in the approach across the Mid Wales region, and that similar funding allocations between the 3 investment priorities had been determined by both authorities. We were told the reason Ceredigion was the lead authority was a matter of expediency and mirrored arrangements from a previous Growing Mid Wales project. We were very pleased to hear of this positive working relationship with Ceredigion County Council for the Mid Wales region as a whole. We were assured that some consultation, as just mentioned by Councillor David, had taken place, which will give town and community councils and other groups opportunities to consider projects for submission in the future, and that members of Parliament had been engaged with across the region. We were assured that it's possible to via up to 30% of the funding between the 3 investments, should that be necessary, and we felt that gave some flexibility there. We were also assured that any groups that were unsuccessful in their funding applications would receive some feedback, which will help them with any future funding preparations, because for a number of groups this will be a new process applying for monies. And we understand that that's going to be anticipated that a wide blend of applications are going to be received for 1-year or 3-year projects from a variety of groups and organisations. The committee suggested that although we note the advice received by the Council from the UK Government regarding the balance of funding over revenue over capital funding, we suggest that the plan be clarified to show that there is an element of discretion available to the Council to allocate the sum for capital funding above the 10% minimum recommendation. And we did express some concerns, firstly regarding the lack of detail in how the funding might be spent based on the listed interventions. We understand that it's very early stages in the process and that this detail will follow as applications are received. And I note that in your Cabinet report today, there are more detailed papers. We were also concerned about the potential timescales that have been imposed by the UK Government. This could limit the time available to those seeking to make applications for their bids, and especially for those smaller community groups and smaller town and community councils who may need to seek support to help them prepare a bid. We did express a concern regarding the lack of sorry, I beg your pardon. No. The other thing that we were concerned about was the maximum management fee that can be claimed by the Council. We were worried that might prove insufficient to administer the scheme, given the complexity of the scheme. And although there were opportunities for joint working with Ceredigion Council, which might provide the efficiencies for the costs in administrating this scheme. We did make some recommendations. So recommendation 1 is that the proposal be clarified in relation to the discretion available to the Council relating to that capital funding, and that paragraph 4.3 in relation to the match funding be clarified, as we were concerned that it might put some groups off if they thought that they would have to match fund when in actual fact that particular group didn't have to. We asked that the webinar of the meeting with town and community councils be circulated to all town and community councils. We were concerned that smaller groups, smaller organisations might have missed that original information, as many of them only have part-time clerk in support. But overall, we were pleased with the document, and we thank Councillor David for presenting it to us.
Thank you very much, Councillor Angela. Very clear presentation, and thank you for attending again and for your very useful contribution. You'll be pleased to see the recommendations have been accepted, and you will receive, your committee, will receive a response in due course, as outlined in the report from Cabinet. There is one aspect I think I should also, from the chair, mention. During the Royal Welsh Show, I and the leader of Ceredigion Council, Councillor Brian Davis, met with a minister from the Welsh office who visited the show. This was the main subject for discussion actually at the show, and I was in the company of the chief executive as well. And we were very encouraged by her attitude and positive attitude towards the work that both councils have done, and in terms of putting forward projects and bids for this money. Interestingly, not all councils in Wales have been so enthusiastic, which is slightly surprising. But anyway, nevertheless, we were encouraged by that. The minister concerned is Baroness Bloomfield, whom I've not met before, but was very pleased to do so. One of the things we did ask is that the multiply element of this is not just limited to numeracy, but also to literacy. It looks slightly odd that it is just numeracy, because usually we talk about numeracy and literacy together, and for good reason. Inability in either is as debilitating as both. So I think she was sympathetic to the idea, obviously indicated that the current disturbed weather, shall we say, at Westminster may mean that there would be no change to things until after early September, when a new Prime Minister is in place and a new cabinet and new ministerial team at Westminster. But she did reiterate that there is absolutely no question of any threat to the funding. This is now in place. And I think it would take something absolutely extraordinary to happen for that to change now. So that was encouraging. So I think we can be confident that what we want to do can be achieved and that the funding will be in place. And there is some hope that that multiply element will be flexed somewhat to make it perhaps more appropriate. So David, is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
Just to say, thanks for that reassurance. We learn as we go along. Clearly, the timescales are such that this plan needs to go to UK government on Friday, and we expect to hear back, or need to hear back, in October latest to proceed. And I think what the useful in the discussions I've had with members and through the scrutiny committee is the continual requirement to inform and debate and learn as we go along about what is and isn't possible. I'm absolutely focused, as is the team, on making sure that we maximise the benefit from this investment. Thank you. I'll answer questions if anyone's got any. No.
Okay. So thank you, Monitoring Officer. Jackie, I think we have you. Jackie Charlton, Councillor Jackie Charlton. Thank you.
Thank you. It
Sorry,
takes a couple of it takes a couple of seconds from pushing the little camera for it actually showing. So apologies, it does take a few seconds. And I really welcome what the scrutiny committee did yesterday. I was able to sit and watch and see how they debated, and I thought the debate was very good. And what has been presented here this morning by the chair of the scrutiny committee reflects that very useful debate that was undertaken, and very pleased to see that. I actually echo what they were saying about small groups and small organisations linking into this, and I welcome what Councillor David and everybody's trying to do, which is to be as transparent and open and communicate as much as possible. But we are still in danger of missing those smaller groups if we don't find a good way of actually communicating with them, and just understanding that small groups don't meet on a regular daily basis. They may only meet once a month. So that time element is incredibly important, that we understand that, and we make sure that the UK government understands how we operate here in Powys, because we do want to support our smaller groups. We do want to support those smaller organisations that don't necessarily engage with us on a regular basis. And it's very good to put stuff out on webinars and on social media and all those other things, but I don't think you can beat the face-to-face contact. And I wonder if there's some way that we can resource up front through this. And I know there is some money for feasibility studies. I think it's about 40,000, which is not enough to cover staff time, but whether we've got any resources that we can put to staff time to reach these smaller organisations, to explain to them what they're capable of applying for and what benefits that might bring to those organisations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Sorry, if I could just answer, just to say, I welcome what the discussion we had yesterday. I forgot in my list of consultations that we did do also a webinar directly with town and community councils. Now, again, not everybody was there. Recognise the number of community councils in Powys is well over 100, and it's we've got to find ways of doing things better across the whole of the council in consulting. But what I will take away is that, yes, we've got to get the balance right between all sorts of factors. One, the interventions that we've agreed to make sure that we're matching those. Secondly, a geographic spread the best we can across the large county that we are, and across the different sectors that we're working with as well. So all I can say at this stage is once we know that we're proceeding indefinite with what we have here, we'll be worked on a plan to make sure that we get as many people involved as possible in this great opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Diane, did you wish to make any comment about the question from Jackie Charlton? Would you like to respond in any way? It's a good point.
Happy to respond. Yeah, the copy of the webinar will be sent round to all town and community councils, but I do understand the difficulty we have in reaching these groups. But the next stage will involve a lot more information, a lot more interaction with all groups, not only town and community councils, but across all of our partners, stakeholders, and we do intend to use whichever means really are possible to contact all of these people. But I take on board the comment about time as well to allow people to respond.
Thank you. And I think that is really important and to understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. We are, the time is sort of prescribed for us rather, and we haven't been given much, but that just one other aspect before we move to the recommendations, which I will ask David to present in due course, is that one of the benefits in the short time that I've been leader of the council that I've seen from this is that it has demonstrated actually that we can work very, very well with Ceredigion and County Council, and I'm very pleased about that, because there have been comments in the past and some members of the council in this council that working with Ceredigion is impossible and difficult and so on. And I've never believed that, and I certainly don't believe it now. I think this is a really good grounding for us to go forward together on things like the Mid Wales Growth Deal and other projects. And I'm really pleased both with the attitude shown by the leader of the council and members of Ceredigion Council and their officers in our conversations together. I'm very encouraged by it, and I think this is a really good sign for the future. So, David, on that positive note, would you like to move these recommendations? Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I will read them positively. Page 208, the recommendations. To note the UK Shared Prosperity Fund prospectus allocations and key requirements to unlocking funding from the UK government. 9.2, to note the approach to consultation and engagement to inform the development of a regional investment plan and to approve the principles set out to enable detailed plan drafting. 9.3, to approve the indicative financial allocations of 40% to communities in place, 40% to supporting local business and 20% to peoples and skills. 9.4, to delegate authority and authorise the corporate directors and Section 151 officer of both authorities in consultation with the leaders of councils to take the necessary decisions and actions required to finalise a related investment plan and accept the allocation of funds, as well as to implement and administer the scheme and all related plans in accordance with the requirements and priorities of the prospectus and fund. To approve the split of capacity funding of £40,000 available to Mid Wales, 50-50 to each local authority to reflect the joint working in developing the regional investment plan to date. And finally, to approve that Ceredigion County Council be the lead (host) authority for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. I'd like to move that, Chair.
Good. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pete Roberts. All those in favour, please. Please show. Thank you very much. That's carried. Excellent progress. We move to item 14 now, which is to consider a levelling up project, again in the name of Councillor David Selby, very important project, pages 295 to 386 in our agenda pack. David.
Thank you, Leader. In front of us is the next step in an important project that has been approved as part of the Levelling Up Fund for Paris Council, along with other projects. And what it does is it unlocks an unfulfilled resource in our county. A resource firstly consisting of the opportunity for boats to eventually get all the way to Newtown from where once they come on the canal as it gets fully restored, but also unlock walking and cycling alongside the waterway in a beautiful part of Powys, and also a fund that safeguards a valuable and unique ecological resource, and finally it allows the development of Welshpool Canal Wharf. And if I could quote as an example, that when we look at what Brecon looks like on a hot sunny day with the boats and the people and the water combined, that's the aspiration for what could be in Llanymynech and in Welshpool, and finally further south than that as the canal gradually is restored. The main element of why this is coming to Cabinet today is to ensure that we have now the next steps, which are all the governance arrangements in place. And in passing, sorry, as I flick down to where that is said, you can see that there are comments from local members, and I think Councillor Church would like to comment as well when I've finished, in terms of the issues and opportunities in Welshpool that come out of this funding. But you can see that local members can see the benefits, the economic unlocking. It's a challenge for us, and there will be further discussions, and part of the challenge is the balance between what might be called pure economic development through tourism, but also to ensure the environment benefits rather than disbenefits from developments around. And that's one element of our aspirations as a partnership, to make sure that we can get that balance right and work on that. But in moving what is here, or talking about what is here, just by finishing to say the key movement that comes from this is to allow the delegation of powers to the Restoration Project Board to make sure that the project is overseen, the ecology is protected, and the development proceeds in a smooth and meaningful way in relations with UK government. So with that, I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions, or looking at Diane to see if there's anything I've missed that she wants to add. Diane's comfortable that I've...
You're okay? Yeah. Richard, did you wish to comment? You're on mute, Richard. There you go.
I forget that every time. Beg your pardon.
Right.
Yeah, there is a brief comment from me in the report, which I'd like to sort of dwell on for just for a moment. Firstly, I think this will be welcomed in Welshpool, and indeed along the length of the canal to the border. My particular interest is the Llanfa building, which lies within my ward in the heart of Welshpool. And that is probably a focal point for the whole canal. It's one of the most important buildings on the canal, owned by this authority. It currently has inside it Welshpool Library and the Powysland Museum. The library was moved in there despite my vigorous campaign against it happening about 3 or 4 years ago. And so we now have a building which combines a library and a museum, but struggles to have the space to do both. This project to invest in the building will be welcome, and it will greatly improve it. But I hope that as the canal project comes to fruition, that we recognise that this key building is put to a use which is relevant to the canal and relevant to its historical purpose in some way or another. So I hope and I seek reassurance that the refurbishment of the building will enable it to be considered for other uses in the future, if we're able to find a better or more suitable location for the library and or the museum at a time in the future. It would be wonderful to see this building put to a use which is associated and relevant to the canal rather than the use to which it is put at the moment.
Thank you for that. Your comments are no doubt noted. David, you wanted to respond, I think.
Leader, I do. I have the benefit and huge advantage of being responsible also for libraries in my brief, so I no doubt have to debate a long time with myself over this particular issue. But it is, Richard makes very good points about that particular building and that area, and clearly we've got to find the best use possible and to make use of the funding that we have through this opportunity to make sure that it is of economic benefit, and much more than that, that it is, as Richard has said, a focal point. So I will definitely take that on board and discuss going forward.
Grand. Good. Any other comments? And what is, another very positive development. Is Councillor Sian Cox, please.
It might be in the report. I haven't seen it, but which sort of ecological impact sort of expert organisations are involved in the whole project to make sure that the ecological impact is minimised and that the enhancement for the environment work is adequate?
The organisations involved in the project are the Canal and River Trust, who have some expertise themselves. Natural Resources Wales are also involved, and they are a statutory consultee to approve the whole of the scheme. And just to emphasise that part of the scheme is about offline, in other words, away from the canal, 3 ecological nature reserves that are being built separately, and there will be continuing discussions with the Montgomeryshire Wildlife Trust as well. Yeah.
Sorry, so when you say continued discussions, are they kind of part of the group that's doing it, or are they just being consulted along the way?
They have been part of the group, and I'll be meeting them soon to seek further involvement from them.
Good. Thank you for that. Good question. Very good question indeed. Good. If there are no further questions or comments, oh, Jackie, sorry, I keep missing you. I do apologise.
It's okay. I know I'm only little. Yes, I very much welcome this, and as a person who lives on the Mon and Brecon Canal, it's about 100 yards from where I live, and seen some amazing work done there on ecological work done there, and biodiversity improvements along the canal. I think they call it the blue and green corridor. So they look to make ecological benefits on the water as well as on the side of the canal as well. I know there have been some tensions around this, and the ecological considerations are very important here. The economic benefit is amazing, and I've seen the way that this can actually make a big difference in Brecon as well. And the Canal and River Trust have done a lot of work on the Brecon and Mon Canal to improve its tourism capability, and it has had a big difference. I don't know what the outcome of that is. I don't know the financial outcome of that and how it's improved communities along the canal, but just living locally, I can see, how important it is and how well it's used. So I do urge us as an authority to walk alongside those ecological organisations to make sure that we do consider what they're saying, because there is always a tendency that we forget the importance of that, and it comes back to bite us. So I would encourage that. I'd also like to see something on here. I'm not sure whether I've missed it anywhere on the impact assessment. Somebody can let me know, is what the impact is on carbon emissions, because there will be some for the build of the canal, or if there is a build, what impact that's going to have, but also what future impacts that might have, both positive and negative. And I wondered whether that's actually part of the application here, or part of the development here, and if it isn't, why isn't it? I'd be interested to know that, so thank you.
Jackie, the actual specific of that, I'm looking towards Diane, I'm afraid, to answer. I'm not sure that assessment has been done.
Carbon assessments haven't yet been included as part of our overall corporate impact assessments, but we will be conducting these as we go through every stage of the build. So actually, as we look at the different bridges or the different reserves and how those impact at different elements. So the impact assessment is on the project overall at the moment, but will be included, and we are including, working to include carbon assessment within our overall impact assessment work as well.
That's very welcome. Could I also urge you to look before starting build what the assessments might be, because you don't want to get halfway down the road and think, well, we could have done a much better job in saving carbon on the build, because there's an enormous amount of impact from carbon on all kinds of builds, especially cement. I don't know how much cement will go into this, but it's really, really important that we are in a position to measure that, because that could make a big difference to our own net zero ambition by 2030. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jackie, and I'll take on board, as you know, I'm taking on board the other comments being made by different organisations about working on it. It's an important project, and it will be an exemplar, I hope, for how we can work in a correct way between all the various interests in quite a complex project.
Good. Just one last question from the chair, actually. Once the work has been done and the canal restored, presumably the responsibility for ongoing maintenance and day-to-day running passes to the river, Canal and River Trust. Is that the case? There won't be any ongoing liabilities for the local authority. So that's what I'm saying.
No, I don't believe so. I'm looking. No, that's true. It's the Canal and River Trust are very enthusiastic about this reopening.
Oh, we have Nigel Bryn back with us. Nigel, you went. I think you come back.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies for my
no, that's fine.
Half an hour. Sorry, I can't say we've answered the point now, but very much so. The responsibility for the canal going forward would be for the CRT. Obviously, the building will be ours, and I'm sure it was mentioned earlier. But this is, of course, a key component for a much broader project in terms of access to canals across England and Wales. So, we can't resolve it all in one project, but hopefully with this and allied projects, we can get access from the centre of Wales to right across the canal network in the UK through the Grand Union Canal, Llangollen Canal, etc. So a very exciting project indeed.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much for that. David, would you like to move the recommendations? I think we've given this a good hearing.
Recommendation that the council, 1, agrees the draft service level agreement with the Canal and River Trust as set out in Appendix B to deliver the project. 1.2 authorises the head of Legal and Democratic Services, in consultation with the Director of Economy and Environment, the head of Finance and Cabinet Member for a More Prosperous Powys, to make necessary adjustments to the draft SLA to ensure agreement with the Canal and River Trust and swift progress of the project. 1.3 authorises the head of Legal and Democratic Services to sign the final SLA on behalf of the council. 1.4 approves the governance structure to oversee the delivery of the project as set out in Appendix C. 1.5 approves the delegation of powers to the Montgomery Canal Restoration Project Board to oversee the direct delivery of the project, with such delegation being restricted to actions within the scope, costs and programme outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding, application bid, project management update and associated bid documentation. And finally, 1.6 approves the terms of reference for the Montgomery Canal Restoration Project Board as set out in Appendix D to the report.
Thank you.
And I move, Chair.
So, could I have a second for that, please? Anybody wish to second it? Councillor Matthew Dorrance, thank you. Seconded. All those in favour, please show. Super. I think we're done. And good, decision made. Thank you very much indeed, and a very exciting and positive project. Well done, David. Thank you for your presentation, and Diane as well. Thank you. Moving on. Sorry. Oh, thank you very much. We moved to item 15, which is to receive the delegated note, the delegated decisions taken since the last meeting. Those are just simply for noting. No vote required. No. And then to look at item 16 for the forward work programme, which is on page 389. A long list of things to be done, and does any member wish to comment on the forward work programme? As I mean, it can be changed. It's purely here for information at the moment, and it's in, if you like, a draft form. We simply can adapt it as we need to as we go forward. But that's as it stands at the moment. Is everybody content to receive that and note it? Yep. And now we have to move to the exempt item 17, which means somebody has to move that we move to a confidential session because the monitoring officer says we have to. Would you like to explain, please? So people understand why we're moving to confidential.
This information in the report contains confidential information, Chair, and for that reason that we recommend that we move into confidential session, and that's proposed in the second and a vote.
Could I have a proposal for that, please?
Leader, in doing so, could I just point out, because as an open and democratic council, obviously we have to accept the advice, but the issue is only a matter of commercial confidentiality in terms of negotiations ongoing at the moment. That's the only reason why we're going into session.
Fine, thank you for that explanation. Do I have a seconder for the move? Thank you, Councillor Matthew Dorrance. And please, all those in favour of moving to confidential session. Thank you. So we move into confidential. So the webcast goes off. To those members of the public who have been watching or listening in, thank you very much for doing so. I apologise, we have to move to confidential session, but it's unavoidable in these circumstances. Thank you very much.